"If I were 20 years younger, I'd marry you," my ex's mom said, laughing. But her eyes weren't laughing at all. And I looked this woman in the face, the mother of the girl who shattered me. And I said the words that froze the entire room. "That doesn't matter to me." But here's what she didn't know. Here's what none of them knew. 2 years ago, her daughter looked me in my eyes and told me I wasn't enough. That I didn't know how to love her the way she deserved. That my heart was kind but my romance was broken. So she walked out my door and ran back to the man who wrote her poetry. The man who made her feel alive. The man who, behind closed doors, raised his hand to her in ways I never could have imagined. And me, I never once raised my voice at her. Not one single time. So when her mother sat across from me with tears she was trying to hide, joking about marrying me 20 years too late, she wasn't really joking. She was telling me something. She was warning me. Because her daughter was standing in the hallway behind me, listening to every word. But why was my ex back at my door at 11 p.m.? Why was her mother begging me with her eyes? And what did this family know about that perfect man that I was about to find out? Let me take you back. My name is Nathan Cole. And the first time I ever saw Celeste Hartley, she laughed at me. It was a friend's birthday party in Chicago. I was standing in the corner, away from the music, quietly fixing a bookshelf bracket that was about to drop on somebody's head. I always carried a small multi-tool in my jacket. My father taught me that when I was a boy. "A man fixes what's broken," he used to say, "before anyone gets hurt." I was tightening the last screw when I heard her. "Are you seriously doing home repairs at a party?" I looked up, and there she was. Celeste, tall, glowing, with a smile that seemed to pull all the light in the room toward her. The kind of woman people turn to look at without knowing why. The kind of laugh that makes strangers feel like friends. I just said the truth. The shelf was going to fall. People are standing under it. She tilted her head and studied me, like I was a puzzle she hadn't expected to find. And then, she didn't walk away. She stayed. She stayed beside me the whole night, asking me questions, laughing at my quiet answers, watching me like I was something rare. That's how it began. Not with fireworks, not with poetry, with a broken shelf and a man who didn't want anyone to get hurt. We started dating 2 weeks later. And for a while, for a beautiful, golden while, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. Because loving Celeste was easy. She was funny and fierce and full of dreams. She wanted to open her own bakery one day. She talked with her hands. She cried at dog commercials and laughed so hard she snorted, then got embarrassed, then laughed harder. And me, I loved her the only way I knew how. Quietly, completely, with actions instead of speeches. When her car was low on gas, I filled it before she woke up, so she'd never be stranded on a cold morning. When she mentioned, just once, in passing, that she hated the smell of fake vanilla, I quietly replaced every candle in our apartment with ones that smelled like cedar and rain. When she had a hard doctor's appointment, I canceled my biggest client meeting of the year and sat in that waiting room holding her hand, because I never wanted her to be scared and alone. I didn't tell her about these things. I just did them. That was my language. That was how my heart spoke. But here's what I didn't understand back then. And it would take me 2 years and a broken heart to learn it. Not everyone speaks the same language of love. And when two people can't hear each other, even the deepest love can start to crack. Because Celeste grew up in a different world than mine. Her father, Walter, was a grand romantic, a sweeping, dramatic, movie scene kind of man. He left love letters under her mother's pillow. He planned surprise trips with no warning. He danced with Dorothy in the kitchen for no reason at all. To Celeste, that was what love looked like. That was the proof. The fireworks, the poetry, the grand, loud, beautiful gestures. And I was not a fireworks man. I was a fix your car, hold your hand, show up every single day man. For the first year, she loved that about me. She'd rest her head on my shoulder and whisper, "You make me feel so safe, Nathan." But somewhere in the second year, something shifted. It started small, so small I almost didn't notice. It was her friends, mostly. Good people, but careless with their words. Girl, my boyfriend flew me to Napa for the weekend. Just because. Doesn't Nathan ever surprise you like that? He's sweet, Celeste. Sure. But does he make you feel something? Like really feel it? And I watched, slowly, helplessly, as my Celeste began to look at me differently. Like she was adding up everything I wasn't, instead of everything I was. She started teaching me, showing me articles about romance, telling me what she needed. And I tried. God, I tried. I booked a rooftop dinner. I spent 3 days writing down what I wanted to say. But I'm not a smooth man. The words came out clumsy. I got nervous and ordered the wrong wine, the one she didn't like. The whole night, I never took my eyes off her face. I never let go of her hand. But she noticed the wine. She didn't notice my eyes. And that was the beginning of the end. His name was Marcus Wells. He came back into Celeste's life like a song she used to love on the radio. Sudden, familiar, impossible to ignore. It started with one text. I know that now. Hey stranger, been thinking about you. 6 words. That's all it took to crack a door that should have stayed closed. Marcus was her college boyfriend. The one who got away, or so the story went. He was tall, magnetic, the kind of man who walked into a room and made every head turn without lifting a finger. He had the smile. He had the charm. And most of all, he had the words. The words I never had. Within 2 weeks, he was sending handwritten notes to her job, showing up with armfuls of sunflowers, quoting poetry over dinner like he'd invented it. He made her feel breathless. He made her feel chosen. He made her feel like the heroine in the kind of movie her father used to play in their living room. And I felt her slipping away like sand through my fingers, and I didn't know how to hold on. I'll never forget the night she ended it. It was a Tuesday, raining. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, the one I'd built with my own hands, and she couldn't even look at me. Nathan, she said, you're the kindest man I've ever known. But kindness isn't the same as passion. I need to feel alive, and I don't. I don't feel that with you anymore. I sat very still. The rain tapped against the window. My heart was breaking in a way I had no words for. And do you know what I did? I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't make her feel guilty for following her heart, even though mine was shattering on that kitchen floor. I looked at her and I said, I hope you find what you're looking for, Celeste. I mean that. That was all. I moved out within the week. And before I left, before I walked away from the only home I'd ever truly loved, I fixed the leaking kitchen faucet. Because she didn't know how. And I couldn't stand the thought of her coming home one day to a flooded floor. That was my last act of love. A fixed faucet she'd probably never even notice. I cried in my truck for a long time before I drove away. But she had made her choice, and I had to let her go. Now here's the part of the story I didn't see. The part that happened behind closed doors, that I only learned much later, and when I learned it, it broke something inside me all over again. The first 3 months with Marcus were everything Celeste had dreamed of. He was attentive, affectionate. He planned beautiful evenings and remembered every date. He made ordinary Tuesdays feel like celebrations. She thought she had finally found it, the fireworks, the passion, the proof. But fireworks burn out fast, and what's left behind is just smoke and ash. Around the 4th month, the curtain began to lift. Marcus was charming to everyone. Every woman in every room. His phone was always face down on the table. His late nights got later. His excuses got longer and harder to believe. And when Celeste asked him about it, gently, carefully, something in him changed. The poet went cold. The charmer turned cruel. His voice rose in a way that made her flinch and step backward until her shoulders hit the wall. She told herself it was a one-time thing. She told herself she'd provoked him. She told herself the flowers he brought the next morning were proof that he loved her. But they weren't proof. They were a pattern. And the pattern got worse. Month after month, the sunflowers kept coming. And so did the nights that left her shaking, locked in the bathroom, sliding down to the cold tile floor with her hand pressed over her mouth so he wouldn't hear her cry. The woman who used to light up every room started to disappear. She lost weight she didn't mean to lose. She stopped laughing the way she used to. The spark in her eyes, the one I fell in love with at that birthday party, flickered and dimmed and nearly went out. But here's the thing about mothers. They always know. Dorothy Hartley called her daughter every single week. And every week, she listened, not just to the words, but to the silences between them. The pauses, the forced cheer, the way Celeste said, "I'm fine," a little too quickly. Dorothy knew. A mother always knows. And one night, sitting alone in Marcus's apartment while he was out, again, with no explanation, Celeste did something that changed everything. She picked up her phone, and she scrolled back, way back, past the sunflowers, past the poetry, past the fireworks that had burned her so badly, and she found a photo. It was an ordinary Saturday, a farmer's market. I was carrying all the bags, every single one, and she was mid-laugh, her head thrown back, caught in a moment of pure, simple joy. She looked safe. She looked at ease. She looked like herself. And she sat there in that cold apartment, staring at that photo, and the truth hit her so hard she could barely breathe. She thought about the faucet I'd fixed before I left, the candles I'd quietly replaced, the doctor's appointment I'd held her hand through, the Tuesday I'd wished her well instead of making her feel small. She thought about how, in 2 whole years with me, she had never once flinched, never once stepped backward against a wall, never once locked herself in a bathroom to cry where I couldn't hear. The man who never wrote her poetry had never, ever made her afraid. And the man who wrote her poetry like a song had never once made her feel safe. That night, something woke up inside her, something that had been buried under sunflowers and fear and the lie that loud love is the only real love. She left Marcus on a Friday. She packed one bag while he slept. She didn't leave a note. She didn't owe that man a single poetic word. She walked out the door, called her mother, and drove through the dark all the way to Dorothy's house in Evanston. Tears streaming down her face, not from heartbreak this time, from clarity. And as she drove, one thought kept circling in her mind, over and over, louder than the engine, louder than the rain. I had it. I had real love, and I threw it away because it wasn't loud enough. But she didn't know where I was now. She didn't know if I'd moved on. She didn't know if I'd ever, ever forgive her. All she knew was that she had to find out, even if it was already too late. 3 months passed. Slowly, gently, Celeste began to heal in her mother's house. She started cooking again, sleeping through the night, laughing, really laughing, at silly things on television. The spark that Marcus had nearly snuffed out began to glow again, soft and steady. But she never stopped thinking about me. And what she didn't know, what nobody had told her, was that months earlier, before any of this fell apart, she had ordered a custom bookshelf from a small furniture workshop in Chicago. My workshop. She'd forgotten all about it, but I hadn't, because that's not who I am. An order is a promise, and I keep my promises, even to the woman who broke my heart. So I finished that bookshelf. I sanded every edge by hand, and when it was ready, I loaded it into my truck and drove it to the delivery address on the form. A house in Evanston. Dorothy Hartley's house. I didn't know Celeste was living there. I swear to you, I didn't know. I carried that bookshelf through the front door, set it carefully against the living room wall, checked that it was level, and adjusted 1 foot so it stood perfectly still. Old habits. Fix what's broken. Make sure nothing falls. Dorothy watched me from the kitchen doorway, her arms folded, a strange, knowing smile on her face. She'd aged since I last saw her, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. And somewhere down the hallway, just out of sight, Celeste stood frozen, her heart slamming against her ribs, listening. Dorothy walked over. She ran her hand along the smooth wood of the shelf, She shook her head slowly, and she laughed. But it was the kind of laugh that's covering something much deeper. "Nathan Cole," she said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to take it as the compliment it is." She looked me dead in the eyes. "If I were 20 years younger, I'd marry you. And I mean every single word of that." She was laughing. But her eyes weren't laughing at all. Her eyes were wet. Her eyes were begging me to understand something she couldn't say out loud. And I looked at this woman, the mother of the girl who shattered me, and I said the words that froze the entire room. "That doesn't matter to me." The kitchen went silent. Dorothy tilted her head, surprised. And then I finished the thought. "Because the only woman whose opinion ever mattered to me in this house isn't you." I heard it then, a small, broken sound from the hallway, a gasp, a held breath finally letting go. Dorothy looked toward the hall, then back at me, and without another word, she quietly picked up her cardigan and said, "I think I left something out in the garden," and she walked out the back door, leaving the two of us alone. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Celeste stepped into the doorway, and my whole world stopped. She looked different, thinner, quieter, a little worn around the edges, the way people get after they've survived something. But her eyes were clear, clearer than I'd ever seen them. And the way she looked at me wasn't the way you look at someone you want something from. It was the way you look at someone you finally, truly understand. "Nathan," she whispered. I couldn't speak. 2 years of silence sat in my throat. "I'm not here to ask you to take me back," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't deserve that. I'm here because I owe you the truth. You were the best thing I ever had, and I was too blind to see it." I stood very still. "I compared you," she said, tears spilling over now. "I compared you to my father, to movies, to my friends' boyfriends, to a man who turned out to be a monster. I measured your quiet love against someone else's loud performance, and I almost compared myself right out of the only real thing I ever had." She pressed her hand to her mouth, and the words came pouring out of her like a dam finally breaking. "You never raised your voice at me. Not once. You filled my gas tank. You changed the candles. You held my hand in that waiting room. You fixed the faucet before you left, so I wouldn't come home to a flood. And I didn't even notice until 3 days later, and when I did, I sat on that kitchen floor, and I cried, because I finally understood what kind of man I let walk out that door. I felt my own eyes burn." "He hurt you," I said quietly. It wasn't a question. She nodded, and in that single nod was a whole story of pain I wished I could erase. And here's the thing about me. The thing Celeste had always known deep down, but only now truly understood. I didn't get angry. I didn't say "I told you so." I didn't make her relive a single second of it. I crossed that room. I stood close enough to see the fear still hiding behind her eyes, and the hope flickering to life beside it. And the first thing I asked her, the very first thing, was 3 quiet words. "Are you safe?" That was all. "Are you safe?" And something inside her broke open completely, in the most beautiful way a heart can break. "I am now," she whispered. "But I want you to know, this is not a story where the man rescues the woman and everything is instantly perfect. Real love doesn't work that way." I didn't take her back that afternoon. I asked for time, and she gave it to me. Freely, patiently, with no pressure at all. Because she was different now. She had learned, in the hardest way possible, what it costs to rush toward a feeling and away from the truth. So we took it slow. We talked. Long, honest, healing conversations. The kind we should have had years before. We took walks on Sunday mornings. I taught her to cook the one dish she'd always been scared to try. She sat with me while I worked late on my designs. Just being present, finally learning my language, the same way I'd spent 2 years trying to learn hers. And one evening, almost to myself, I admitted something. "I kept the ring," I said. "I don't know why. I just couldn't let it go." She looked at me, her eyes shining. "Maybe you were keeping it for a reason." Maybe I was. Months later, On a cool October Sunday, I drove her back to that farmer's market. The same one from the photo. The one where she'd looked so completely at ease. I didn't hire a violinist. I didn't write a speech. That's not who I am. And she knew that now. She loved that now. I just stood in that same spot, holding all the bags, every single one, like always, and I pulled out a small velvet box that had been riding in my jacket pocket for far too long. I'm not perfect at this, I told her, but I am certain about you. I always have been. She didn't even let me finish the question. Yes, she said. Yes, Nathan. 1,000 times yes. And 2 stalls over, shopping for autumn squash, by the most wonderful coincidence in the world, Dorothy Hartley covered her mouth with both hands and cried the happiest tears of her entire life. We were married the following spring, in a small garden surrounded by the people who loved us. No fireworks, no grand performance. Just 2 people who finally chose each other, clearly, freely, and forever. And every morning since, before she even wakes up, her car is already full of gas. Because some love doesn't shout. Some love just shows up. Every single day. So let me ask you something before you go. Have you ever overlooked a quiet, steady love in your life? Chasing something louder, flashier, that promised the world but couldn't keep you safe? Have you ever almost let comparison steal a blessing that was right in front of you? Think about it. Really think about it. Because the loudest love is not always the truest love, and the person who fixes what's broken without ever asking for applause might just be the greatest gift you'll ever have. If this story touched your heart, tap that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this again. Because your next reminder of what real love looks like could be just one notification away.